Hey, this is Ralph, and we're going to keep working on our mobile-friendly navigation menus here. So we're still in the early phases and kind of still setting up some consistent layout and features for all three phone sizes. And let's go ahead and start to formalize the navigation menu, not just on one phone, but on all three layouts. And then at the end of this video, we can hide two phones, and then we'll pick up and focus our attention on how we want to display or hide one menu at a time. So let's see what we've got going on here. So on the HTML side of things, nothing too exciting. However, I do have this menu set up, and based on what we've seen on professional websites, so based on those examples that I was looking at before, pretty much everybody is putting a header at the top, or at least displaying the menu button right at the top. It's always visible. I like to do the same kind of thing. That's probably a safe bet. You know, when a user opens up that menu, you don't want to move the button. You know, you want to keep it roughly in the same spot. And for the most part, they're putting it over on the right. Just one site, Rhino Skin Solutions, they have the menu button on the left, which is not unusual too. I see a lot of that. And I think they mostly did that because, you know, that's typically the menu is going to be on the left. And they also wanted to reserve space for their shopping cart, shopping bag icon. So understandable. But let's try to be consistent with ours, at least for some stuff that's not too critical for the design of the menu, I guess. And for each of my phone frames, I am going to create a header. And I'm going to go ahead and take the button, which was originally outside in the nav, and I'm going to move that button up into the header. So now that I've got that for my phone frame 1, I'm going to copy that. And I'll paste it for my phone frame 2. Got to make sure I get rid of the old button. And for my phone frame 3. That's tough to say. Get rid of that button. And I guess while I'm here, I'm also going to, excuse me, I'll copy that menu item. I'm sorry, copy the unordered list that's in there. And I can paste it in there and paste it in there. So now we have a little bit of consistency. Now things aren't going to look quite right because we need to style these elements. So let's start from the top and let's see how things are going. So I'm going to head back over to my CSS. And although I do have sections which are going to be devoted to each particular phone, I think for a lot of this stuff, I can put it up here in this generic area or this upper area, which I intend to control all of this stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and say, I've got this header here, and I'm going to give it a background color. That's, I don't know, bluish gray. Just need to get it there. I need to give it some height. I'll do about 60 pixels, and that should allow us to see that header space. I do want to be very precise with my navigation button control. So for that header, I'm also going to do a position relative, which is then going to allow me to create a rule for the button that's within that header. And I want that button to be, well, let's go ahead and give it some characteristics that I had before. In fact, remember I was messing around with this button before, and I think I'll just go ahead and cut all of that out, delete, and paste. And let's see, I still want it to be position absolute. However, this time I don't need it to be from the bottom. I can be from the top, and we'll just start off with a number like 4 pixels. And from the right, yeah, we'll leave it there for now. It's got width. However, I don't know about that width because my header is only 60 pixels tall. So let's see, if my button is 50 pixels tall, we'll do some math in just a moment. Actually, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing anyway. I think a width of 60 pixels might be okay. Let's make it square shape. So the button is 50 pixels by 50 pixels, has a 4 pixel border. All right, well, let's see what we've got going on here. All right, the button is showing up pretty nicely. I'm going to move it a little closer to the right, which means I can reduce that right position there. And yeah, I think think I'm okay with that. I think everything's saved. I think it's working. And I just want to double check, make sure everything's looking good with my link. Yeah. Cool. So I'm pretty satisfied with that for now. Now, of course, when the user clicks this button, it is going to trigger a little bit, it's going to call a JavaScript function, invoke a function. And I'm probably going to want to have this button content change. I doubt we're going to leave this as a word. It's probably, in fact, the button even may go away completely. And we're going to have probably some kind of a hamburger icon that changes out to a close or an X icon. So we probably will be doing some icon changes there. We can leave the button tag and just change background images. There's a few different options, but at some point that button is going to change, which means the JavaScript will, in addition to changing the value of a class on the nav, is probably going to also have to change some value or class on the button itself. And that's fine. We can handle that when we're focusing our attention more. But otherwise, I'm feeling pretty good about those header sections. That seems to be a good standard. Whether your button is over on the left or on the right, all depends on that content that you want to have over there. But I do like the idea, if I can, having the branding, the logo on the left, and the menu button there on the right. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to style these nav menu items here a bit. And for the most part, I think I can still do this in this generic area. So let's see. I am going to have my nav mobile menu, and let's go ahead and style the list items for the moment, because I am using list items for all of them. So that I can really see these, I'm going to put a thin border. It doesn't have to be too obvious, and it doesn't even have to be something that I would intentionally keep. Most of these I notice don't use borders. It just clutters up the field when you have too many borders on there. But for the short term, I love borders because it helps you really see the boundaries of the object that you're manipulating. So, okay, no problem. Let's go ahead and do a few other things here. List style type none is going to get rid of the bullets on those list items. And let's go ahead and set the height of these to be 50 pixels. It's going to make them nice and big and chunky. However, what I really want to be big and chunky, of course, is the anchor tags that are within those list items. So I'm also going to create a rule, nav.mobileMenu anchors. I do get the question a lot, why am I putting nav dot in front of these? In real life, you don't need to. I'm doing that as a reminder that this mobile menu is a nav element as opposed to a div, which I've also been using a lot of today. So obviously, if I just have nav dot mobile menu, that means it's a class attribute applied directly to a nav tag. So, and if I didn't have that nav dot, or I'm sorry, if I didn't have nav and I just had dot mobile menu, everything would be perfectly fine. Now the anchors in question, I'm going to make these anchors display as block elements, and that's going to make those anchors fill out really nicely. But in addition to that, that's going to control their width. I'm going to set their heights to be 100%. I want those anchors to fill up their parent, and the anchor's parent is the list item. So just doing that is going to make these really nice big anchors. If these were different menu items going to different locations, you could see them change just as you hover over them, just with your browser's display of the hyperlink, but I'm confident that's working well. So that's looking good. But I also really like on the examples how that's a pretty bad one there. That text is relatively small. But when we can, I really do like those big, chunky text items as big as reasonable depending on the text, so that it makes it easier for the user to click on. That seems pretty small there too. So yeah, let's try to make our menu item text as big as possible. That will depend on the text in question, but let's go for it. So in addition to these things, let's see. I think I want to do a font size. It's pretty big. I don't know. 35 pixels. Remember, I've got 50 pixels of height. How's that going to look? That's pretty darn big. I like that. Before I do that, let me scale it down for a bit. Let me show you this. Let's make it even smaller. Okay, so before I size it up, let's go ahead and take care of this. text decoration, none, gets rid of that underline, and then I'm going to do a line height of 50 pixels. And that's going to give me an approximate vertical centering of that text within the anchor. I'm picking a line height that's comparable to the height of the object itself. My list item is 50 pixels tall. My anchor is a block inside of that, so technically my block is probably something like 48 pixels because I do have that little 1 pixel thick border, but once that border goes away, that difference will go away. So line height of 50 pixels gives that vertical centering, and while I'm here, I'm also going to do a text indent of 0.5 ems, which is just going to push that text away from the left a little bit. Now that I've got that text roughly where I want, I can play around with that font size. Let's blow that up big time. There we go. Yeah, I'm kind of liking that a lot. However, it can be a bit misleading to have all of your mock menu items the same length, because in reality that doesn't work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little break and head over to my HTML, and I'm going to change up my menu items so that they are varying lengths. And I'm probably just going to write out 1, 2, 3, 4, just in text so that we can see those deviations. So let me go ahead and pause my recorder while I do that. Okay, so I just changed out my menu items a little bit, but I did something else while I was here too. I wrapped the word menu in span tags because I wanted to point something out. Before I do that, let me go ahead and take this newly modified unordered list and make sure all of my other menus have that same unordered list. There we go. So that save has been changed back over here. All right, so things are definitely looking good on the large menu. But I wanted to point out how obviously on a smaller platform, that menu item text is pretty long. So I wanted to throw a span in there that I could hide or display none for these smaller devices. So for my phone 2 and my phone 3, here's what I'm going to do. For phone 2, phone frame 2, nav, anchor, span. I'm going to do a display none. That's going to get rid of the span text. Now this of course takes some thought when you're developing the original nav menu, and you're going to want to make sure that if the text is removed from that menu item, the shortened version is still descriptive to what it is. So for instance, we could have, instead of get in touch with us, we can have contact us, or we could just shopping cart could just become the word cart, or that kind of thing. Browse the catalog could change to just the catalog. All right, so let's make sure. Oh yeah, and we can see that that's shortened for that menu. That's cool. That works well there. No problem. Let's go ahead and copy that, pop it down here for phone 3, change this reference to phone 3. And so that's a little bit shorter. Now the other thing you're noticing, and this is probably just going to be on our demo here, you can see that obviously the height of this menu in that phone 3 is just a little bit too long. So what I'm going to do, and we probably wouldn't do this in real life, and we may have to take it off if, once we're done and if we're going to test these in real phones, I'm going to go to my phone frames, and I'm going to do a Overflow Hidden. So basically, any content that is outside of that red border is going to be hidden from view, and that'll give us a real look. Now this isn't real enough. I mean, I can't scroll here and see the bottom where I could on a real phone. So I think that's going to be good for now, just so we can kind of get the impression of what this large menu would look like in a small viewport. And we saw that on a couple of these websites. Here's one right here on Track Systems where the nav menu was much taller than the viewport height. So we have to scroll to see all of the menu items. And that's kind of the intention here. So the phone menu items are still big. We can still see them pretty clearly, and I'd have to scroll to see them all. All right, I think we're doing pretty good here. Now, because of the way this is structured, I don't necessarily need that height, but I want to spend some time in the next videos starting to focus my attention on these individual navigation menus. Before I do that, let's minimize our distraction. So on the CSS, I'm going to head over to my phone frame 2, and I'm going to choose display none, and then on my phone frame 3, display none. What's that going to do? Well, it's going to hide that content from phone frame 2 and 3, because now we're getting to a point where customization is going to be pretty key, and I want to start to manipulate how I want this nav menu to look. So if I start to make some styling changes, they're going to be to my phone frame 1, and for instance, instead of using this height right here, I may not need height at all, because that menu has content, which is going to force its height. So that could be pretty good depending on how we want to go. And then it's just a matter of picking up, okay, well, how do I want this nav menu to appear? Do I want these anchors to be taller, list items to be taller? Do I want this to come in from the top? Do I want it to come in from the left? So I want to focus my attention on just this particular phone model, and then we can use techniques and things we learn in this phone model to apply to the smaller versions. So let's pick this up in the next video. Thanks for hanging out.